Hi, I'm Ariel. You're watching She Wants the Diction, and today I'm going to be doing the A to Z book tag. I was tagged to do this by Michelle Lexi, and I will link her video below. I've honestly been tagged in a lot of tags recently, and I've tried to do them, as in, like, I've tried to film, and every single time my equipment has failed me, like, my mics have failed me, you know, the camera that I use that's really an old phone that doesn't work very well has failed me. Like, literally, this is like my fourth time trying to record some sort of video to put up on my channel. Okay, author you've read the most books from. And surprisingly, when I looked at my Storygraph stats, I saw that the author I read the most from was Thich Nhat Hanh. Like, ever since Adam recommended me that first book by him, I kind of went through a mini phase where, like, I was obsessed with reading everything by him I could possibly get my hands on. And so I've listened to a lot of his audiobooks, and he just does a really good job of explaining, like, mindfulness and Buddhist concepts. And he does it in a way that I feel like it's a little bit almost like poetic. Like, it's more poetic than it would be in like a psychiatry textbook, right? And they say that DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, which is a lot of the same concepts as Buddhism and mindfulness and things like that, is really helpful for people that have been through trauma and have trouble emotionally regulating. I just feel like he is a very good guide and sort of an introduction to that type of stuff. And that's not to say that he says anything extremely different from book to book, because honestly a lot of it is really repetitive, but I feel like just the more that I read it, the more that it kind of like integrates and like becomes part of me. And like, I like to read books about like mindfulness and stuff like that every so often to just sort of remind myself. Like, that's the main thing for me, is just like keeping it in the forefront of my mind. And he honestly just seems like such a like gentle, practical, and also like a funny person. Like, if you listen to the live like talks and stuff that he gives, like, he just seems like, I don't know, just like a very sweet man. Best sequel ever. Okay, I don't really have an answer for this because I don't read a ton of series, but I guess I'm gonna go ahead and say the second book of Parable of the Sower. I'm really reaching though, like, I don't have an answer. Currently reading. Okay, currently I just started Dune, an ebook copy, and the reason for this being, like, I couldn't really find a copy anywhere. Like, it's really difficult to find a copy of this just because, like, the movie just came out, and I did go and watch the movie online at home, and I feel like I just wanted to read the book because I had so many questions. Like, a few months ago, me and Adam also watched the 80s one, and I just feel like there were so many things that I was like, wait, how did we get here? Like, one of the main things that I didn't understand is what would have changed about the story if Paul had been born a girl? Like, the head of the Bene Gesserit, I think is how you say it. Like, anyways, she was like pissed that Jessica had a boy instead of a girl. And I was like, okay, I get that because like their order or whatever is made up of women. But like, so how would the story have changed if you know, Paul had been a girl? Like, would it still have been a big deal? Like, would she still have been prophesied to be the savior? Like, what is going on here? Like, I just didn't understand what the big fucking deal was, basically. And another thing that kind of bothered me about the movie, which I'm just like full on ranting now here, it was that I feel like there was no transition between the period where Paul was like, I'm not the savior, that's a dumb prophecy, please just no. And then he went from kind of like adopting it, almost like accepting it. Like, I don't know if he believed it, but he was like acting like he believed it and like saying it. And I don't know if that's just because, you know, he just lost his dad and he's upset, and it's sort of a, I'm in the middle of the desert, I don't know what I'm doing, sort of like a personal survival thing. Like, he just is like, yeah, I'm the savior now, and I'm gonna survive, and I'm gonna do all these things. Like, I don't know if it was one of those, but like, there wasn't transition shown, and there wasn't much of him showing him like struggling with the fact that he's prophesied to be this messiah person. Like, I don't know, I just wanted more. I wanted more there. I feel like there was so much missing and so much that they cut out that I was like, okay, I just need to go read this fucking book so I can know what's really going on. And I'm only like 5% in, but I'm already seeing there was a lot that was cut out, and I feel like I'm enjoying the book more. And yeah, I feel like I'm gonna like it. Obviously, like, the fat phobia of just having like the main Harkonnen dude like just be super fat, like, it's like shorthand for being like greedy and evil, I feel like is kind of bothering me. But also, like, you have to consider that it was written in the 60s, so gonna have problematic ass shit. And then the other thing that I'm reading is this book called Why Solange Matters, and I've kind of been into reading just like music journalism, I suppose you could say, lately, because I just finished a book on Kendrick too. But anyway, so this is a book by the University of Texas Press, and I asked my local library to get it, and they did, and I'm halfway through, exactly, and I really like this. Like, I am tearing through this. I've only been reading this for like 2 or 3 days maybe, and I feel like I'm probably gonna finish it today maybe. But anyway, I love Solange, and I feel like this is just giving so much like insight into not only her personal life, but then like connecting it to the author and why it's important for weirdo black girls to kind of have her music. I just feel like she's so underrated compared to Beyonce, but just equally important to have like that like down to earth, like chill, more in the background sort of vibe, as it is to have somebody, you know, obviously as flamboyant and everybody loves her, and she's kind of like this sort of this like perfect diva, like goddess figure almost, like she has like mythical status, whereas I feel like Solange is just kind of like, this is not at all an insult to her, but she just feels like more like girl next door. Like she feels like more of like a regular black girl than somebody like Beyonce that's reached like cult status, you know. And the other thing that I'm in the middle of is this big old collected poetry of Nikki Giovanni. It's about 350 pages minus the notes, so this is huge, and it is spanning from 1968 to 1998, so this is like decades of her poetry, and I'm really liking it too, even though it's long and it's kind of hard for me to keep my focus. I bought this when I was in kind of a slump, like as a treat to myself, and because I had read one of her poems in this I don't have the book on me right now, but it was this anthology, Ain't I a Woman? A Book of Women's Poetry from Around the World. And it's essentially just like an anthology of poems from the 80s. And I had read one of her poems in here, I think Nikki Rosa, which I think is one of her most famous ones. And I was just like, wow. Like that poem literally just like punched me in the face. So I was like, wow, I really need to get some of Nikki Giovanni's poetry because I feel like she's really good and I've barely read anything by her. So that was sort of the impetus for me to purchase this. Drink of choice while reading. Probably iced green tea, because I like to read outside on, well, you guys can't see it, but there's literally like a balcony and we live on like a second story, so when you're out on the balcony, like you can't see like the ugly ass parking lot and like all the cars and people or whatever, so it's kind of like isolated, but it's like sunny. Like it's literally just like the perfect place. And also like I feel like getting the sunlight helps so much with my depression. Like vitamin D, y'all, like vitamin D. I don't know, it just makes me so happy to just like sit out there with my sunscreen on, don't forget your sunscreen, and just like tan and read books and chill and drink my iced green tea. Okay, e-reader or physical book? Definitely a physical book. If I have the option, I will almost always have a physical book. But you know, e-readers have their place. For example, like when I can't find a book, or I don't want to pay for it, or I don't want to wait for it at the library, or I'm traveling so that I'll never run out of things. I don't have to carry around heavy, thick tomes. Yeah, I had this Kindle for like literally 5 years. Like Adam has glued it back together for me. I feel like I've definitely gotten my money's worth out of this one, and like it's still going, you know? Like the charging port has a little issue where like you have to get the cord like bent just exactly right, but like as long as this thing works, I'm gonna keep using it. Fictional character you probably would have actually dated in high school. I have no idea. Like literally just no idea. Like I can tell you who I would have dated in college, which is pretty much any asshole boyfriend in any book that you've ever read. Glad you gave this book a chance. I'm gonna have to say The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin, which I just read recently, and I actually ended up liking it like a lot more than I thought I would. I had tried to read her short story collection, How Long Till Black Future Month, and I think I read a couple of stories in and I was just like not feeling it. Like it was just, I don't know what it was. I think it was the writing style. I just didn't like it for some reason. So because everyone's been reading Fifth Season and just like raving about it, I was like, okay, it's finally time for me to sit down and try to read this. And I was like actually pretty drawn in. Like I enjoyed it a significant amount, like enough to where I have the second book, and I don't know when I'm going to start it, but I guess maybe after I finish Dune. But because why am I starting a different series in the middle of a series? Like literally why am I like this? Hidden gem book. Now I've said this before on my channel, but The Autobiography of an Ex-Colored Man by James Weldon Johnson. Extremely underrated. I feel like I hear people talk about, you know, certain black classics such as, you know, The Color Purple, let's see, Beloved, different things like that, but you never hear anyone talk about this one. And I feel like this one is interesting because it's also about passing. Like I know people mention Passing by Nella Larson, but I feel like this is like sort of a man, it's about a man passing. I believe this author was in the NAACP, and he also co-composed the Negro National Anthem, I believe. I feel like I read this last year and I just absolutely loved it. I think if you like sort of sparse prose, that you will enjoy it. And I had absolutely no trouble reading this, even though It's quite old. First published 1927, maybe? Oh, wow, no, even earlier. First published anonymously in 1912, this resolutely unsentimental novel gave many white readers their first glimpse of the double standard and double consciousness that ruled the lives of Black people in modern America. Republished in 1927 at the height of the Harlem Renaissance with an introduction by Carl Van Vechten, the Autobiography of an Ex-Colored Man became a groundbreaking document of Afro-American culture. The first-person novel ever written by a Black, okay, I didn't know that. It became an eloquent model for later novelists ranging from Zora Neale Hurston, love her, to Richard Wright and Ralph Ellison. So it sounds like this had quite the influence. Narrated by a man whose light skin enables him to pass for white, the novel describes a journey through the strata of Black society at the turn of the century. From a cigar factory in Jacksonville to an elite gambling club in New York, from genteel aristocrats to the musicians who hammered out the rhythms of ragtime. It is a complex and moving examination of the question of race and an unsparing look at what it means to forge an identity as a man in a culture that recognized nothing but color. Yeah, this is really, really good, and it's not too long either. It's like 200-something pages, so yeah, just please read it. Okay, important moment in your reading life, which I feel like is kind of related. So essentially, I feel like it was when I realized there was this whole other Black literary canon that was not really shown to us in school. Like, we would read, like, the occasional Langston Hughes poem or, something of that nature, but really we didn't read a whole lot of Black authors in school or Black writers, and I just really thought that there weren't very many. You know what I mean? But that's not true at all. There's whole Black literary movements and writers, and even just like, Toni Morrison or like the famous novelists. Like, we never read any of those novels. Instead, we were reading these white novels written by white people about racism. Like, Why is To Kill a Mockingbird the novel that's always on the curriculum, when it comes to discussions about racism? Like, why are we not reading books by actual Black authors? Like, and this is something that I feel like I always questioned, and you could see this if you go back early on my channel. I was always like, what the fuck is up? Like, why are we learning all these white authors? Why are these people who aren't from the culture writing about the culture? And I feel like, being part of the book community, I sort of found the answer to that. I was like, oh my God, there's this whole other canon that they're not showing us, that they're not teaching, that they don't care about, because, you think of writers as being all old white guys, and that's just not the facts of it. That's just not the facts. And so I feel like that was a major turning point for me. That's kind of when I started collecting books by Black authors. So now I have like a whole collection that I'm always adding to and trying to build out. And, I discovered what Own Voice's work was. And so that was great. I was like, where's all the queer authors? Where's the Black authors? Where's the authors that are like me? And just finished, I already talked about this a little bit. It was Promise That You Will Sing About Me, The Power and Poetry of Kendrick Lamar by Miles Marshall Lewis. And I listened to this on audio. I liked it. I gave it 3 stars. What I really liked about this book is that it wasn't afraid to criticize Kendrick Lamar, because I do think he has had different sort of missteps throughout his career, and his politics haven't always been perfect. And I do think what's interesting about him is that he sort of does tend to reflect, like, culture at large. Like, a lot of his, like, attitudes and beliefs and expressions and things like that are things that were sort of inherent and woven into Black culture, and he's so good at expressing like what the culture believes almost. Like, I feel like he's pretty representative of that, and I think that's what makes him such a powerful artist, is that he's sort of like channeling the whole like culture, the whole community, everything. And so you can see a lot of that reflected within his music, but it does also mean that there are some problems in his music, like, especially with colorism in some of his earlier songs, misogyny, just different things that I do think he has grown and learned, and even some like respectability politics that I find kind of sketchy, and just different offhand lines that he's had in his songs, like the one about, sort of defending Michael Jackson and saying it's ridiculous that he could have been this sex offender, just different things where it's kind of like, I agree with most of what he says overall, but occasionally there's some little thing that doesn't quite sit right. And so I liked that this journalist wasn't afraid to sort of highlight those moments. A lot of these moments are things that I've thought myself, and I was like, oh my God, someone's actually like writing this in a book. Like, they're not just worshiping and praising him to the high heavens, which, I love Kendrick. Like, I'm a huge fan, but I think when you love something, you can't just look past its flaws. Like, you also need to point those out and like make sure you're consuming things critically, because like, these are human beings. These aren't like idols. These aren't like gods. So I really like that this writer wasn't afraid to do that. I did like the autobiographical bits that he sort of includes, like the memoir type stuff. I liked that a lot less Mostly because he's talking about all these groups that are from 90s hip-hop that I just don't know. I just don't know classic hip-hop. Like, a lot of people consider that to be, like, classic hip-hop, and that's just not my time. Like, I was a child in the 90s, so I wasn't listening to rap music, so I don't know those artists, you know what I mean? Like, so those parts weren't really that interesting to me. And I did think there were some weird moments in this book where he was just sort of like, I'd like to give you an example. At one point he was like, yeah, Kendrick is no Drake, like, sort of like, not like bashing on his looks, but just being like, he's not really gonna have the same appeal to like a female audience as somebody like Drake does. Like, he's not as good looking, essentially. And I was like, bro, do you have eyes? Like, I understand like his ears stick out a little bit, but I still feel like, and like he's kind of on the shorter side, which I feel like is maybe where you could be getting that, but I feel like overall, like, Kendrick's a good looking guy. Like, he's cute. So I was just like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, literally, like, he is attractive. Like, I'm lost, you know? I was like, this guy trying to speak for who's attractive and who's not, like, I don't know that you were correct, sir. Okay, kinds of books you won't read. I don't know, I don't have any, like, set rules on things that I won't read, but I do think there's probably things that I tend to avoid. Like, I talked about how I avoid series. I would never really read Christian fiction because I was brought up in fundamentalism, like, not something I enjoy. I don't really love reading nonfiction when it's not on audio. Like, I get through most of my nonfiction, like probably like 90% of it is on audiobook, and if it were not for that, I don't feel like I would read as much as I do. Like, the majority of my reading is nonfiction now because of that. But I feel like if you looked at my channel, like, before I got into audiobooks, like, it was mainly fiction. So I feel like my reading balance or whatever has kind of changed because of that. Longest book you've read? If I had to guess, probably A Little Life. I don't tend to read books that are over 500 pages. I'm interested because I feel like page count isn't the same as word count. Like, A Little Life, I feel like the words fill the page, whereas like Fifth Season is also like a 500 page book, but I feel like it was like double spaced, so I feel like it's not the same. Major book hangover because of, again, I feel like A Little Life was just so emotionally devastating and emotionally draining. Like, not only was I obsessed with it for a full week after finishing it, which for me is very rare. Like, I lose interest in a book, you know, a couple days after finishing it. Like, I'm not interested in seeing it or talking about it or anything like that after that point. But I was literally like listening to all of the author interviews after I finished that. I was watching, you know, all of the reading vlogs, all of any content pretty much that had to do with The Little Life. I was on it, and I was like intensely obsessed with it for probably a week afterwards. And I couldn't, it felt like I like couldn't start anything else, which I guess is what a book hangover is, because it was just so like I just needed all of the things about it. You know, it's like finishing a series and then immediately like you need to go get the fan fiction because like you're withdrawing basically. Okay, number of bookcases you own. I had 3 before, just got a 4th. 2 of them are the little narrow ones, and then the other 2 are sort of bigger. They're just cheap IKEA shelves. I've never in my life, I am 28 years old, but I've never in my life before this had my own full-size bookshelves like as an adult. And so even though they're cheap, like I'm just super excited, but I never want to seem like I'm like flexing on anyone, because like not everyone can afford giant bookshelves, not everyone can afford books. So like that's another reason that I don't like to sit here. Like, I've never filmed in front of this because I don't want to be like flexing or for somebody to think that like, you know, I'm rich or I have money, because like I don't. I thrift most of this shit. Yeah, I don't know. I just don't want to be like non-inclusive or like inadvertently hurt anyone's feelings that might be watching, even if it sounds silly to a lot of people, because I think a lot of people just take for granted that they can purchase, you know, whatever books they want at whatever time. It's like a lot of people have more important priorities that they can't spend the money on it, or they're reading from the library and they don't have shelves to put behind them and things like that. So I just always want to be very considerate how I'm coming off. One book you've read multiple times. I haven't read very many books more than once, but I think I'm looking at my favorite shelf way up there. Flowers for Algernon. Annihilation, I have read twice. Once on audio and once in physical. Perks of Being a Wallflower, I just reread this year. Ender's Game, I've probably read several times. Probably the book I've reread the most, just because I've like read it multiple times throughout my life. Preferred place to read, I feel like I already kind of answered this one. It's outside on the nice sunny balcony. Quote that inspires you / gives you all the feels from a book. I have a bunch of quotes I like, but I can never think of them like right off the top of my head. Since right now I'm thinking about A Little Life, that one that Willem says to Jude, I think it's like, you were treated horribly, you came out on the other side, you were always you. Like, I don't know, just like their relationship, and also the fact that like, I'm an abuse survivor, like, I feel like that just, like, hit me. Like, that's just, like, shit that you need to hear. Like, you overcame something, and you always would have been you anyways, you know? Like, I don't know how to explain it. I just love it so much. Like, that book means so much to me. Reading regret. I can't really, like, name a regret. Like, I feel like even books that I read that I, like, don't like, or that feel like they're a negative experience, or like I DNF it or whatever, I feel like I'm always learning more about, like, what I do like to read, and what, you know, more about myself, like my tastes, or like what not to do next time, you know? Like, I always feel like every book, good or bad, is sort of adding something to the experience. So I don't have a whole lot of, like, regrets, really. Series you started and need to finish. Okay, I was just talking about N.K. Jemisin's books, and yeah, I do want to finish that series. Like I said, I have the second book literally sitting right over there, so it's gonna happen. 3 of your all-time favorite books. I kind of have already mentioned all of these, but I'm gonna go ahead and say A Little Life, Perks of Being a Wallflower, and then Annihilation. Unapologetic Fangirl 4. Okay, I've already, like, talked about my love for Ender's Game, like, multiple times on this channel, and the angle that I feel like I'm an unapologetic fangirl for it is the fact that, like, the author is a huge fucking bigot, and also a lot of people, I think, read this book as an adult and don't like it. And the reason I love it so much is I feel like I read it when I needed it. Like, if you're a student that went through gifted programs, like, when you were super young and were, like, bullied and shit like that, I feel like that book, like, reflected the experience, like, back to me at the time that I was, like, going through. It just meant a lot to me as a kid, like, to have that. And I feel like people that are reading it as an adult are like, you know what, this book isn't that good. Like, it's kind of, like, simplistically written, yada, yada, yada. Like, I don't really like it. And I'm like, I feel like you weren't reading it at the correct age. You know what I mean? Like, you missed the window of when you could have read it, and it might have meant more to you. And I do fully recognize, like, as an adult, some of the, like, flaws with it, but still, overall, like, it means so much to me. I don't enjoy the fact that it's written by a huge bigot, but, you know, people who say they hate that book, I'm just like, it is what it is. You know, you're not gonna, like, change my love for it or how important it's been to me in my life. So very excited for this release more than all the others. I can't really think of any books that are coming out that I'm excited about. I usually don't know about them until they appear on the library. Oh, worst bookish habit. I guess my worst habit could be considered maybe DNFing stuff too much, but I'm a mood reader, and I've just kind of learned to go with the flow, and if a book isn't working for me, you know, there's always the option to come back to it later, but forcing myself through it never works, and I feel miserable the entire time. Like, I just gave myself permission to DNF several books that I was reading, and I felt so much better after that, and I was excited because I was able to read something that I was actually interested in. Yeah, I feel like a lot of people might consider that a bad habit because there's a lot of, like, completionists out there, or, like, once they start something, they have to finish it, which is how I used to be. I was very perfectionistic about my reading, but I realized that's not fun. There are so many millions of books out there that I'm not going to waste my time on something that's not doing it for me, which is not to say I'll never read anything that challenges me or that is hard to read. It's just that if I do need to read something that's difficult, I can go into it with more preparation. I just feel like it can be viewed as a negative, as in, like, you didn't give this enough of a chance. You didn't stick with it long enough. You didn't try hard enough. Like, but I just don't subscribe to that. Like, if a book is good, I feel like I should just naturally want to read more and be enjoying it from the get-go. Okay, X marks the spot. Start at the top left of your shelf and pick the 27th book. So that's going to be my Black authors shelf. And it is Alice Walker's The Color Purple, which I did read earlier this year, just a couple of months ago, I think. And I didn't super love it. I'm going to be 1000% honest with you. The entire time I was reading, I kind of just wanted it to be over. I don't really know why. I might try to watch the movie at some point and see if maybe it goes over better in that format, but yeah, don't come for me. I can't really explain why I didn't care for it. I just didn't. My latest book purchase. I just bought a couple of books recently. One is right here. This is Charles Bukowski, Sifting Through the Madness for the Word, the Line, and the Way. And again, I do enjoy some Bukowski, even though it's like mostly the terrain of pretentious white dudes who think they know a lot about literature. But anyway, I still enjoy him. And the reason you may never have heard of this one is because I believe it's one that was published after he died. And I think I've only read one other collection that was published after he passed. And I feel like it honestly wasn't as good. Like, I don't know if he just might have mellowed with his old age, or you know, like his priorities changed. Obviously, like you're gonna change throughout your life, but it just wasn't as good to me as something like Love is a Dog from Hell, which I feel like is a much earlier work. I honestly wish I came across more Bukowski books because I would like to kind of like collect his whole deal. And then this was another book that I bought in the same thrift haul, but it was Black Skin, White Masks by France Fanon, and I believe I've tried to read this before. It's kind of very academic and dense though, so I don't know how well, you know, I would do. At the time that I tried to read it, it just wasn't the right time, so hopefully at one point I will return to this. A major influence on international civil rights, anti-colonial, and Black consciousness movements, it is an unsurpassed study of the Black psyche in a white world. Hailed for its scientific analysis and poetic grace when it was first published in 1952, the book remains a vital force today from one of the most important thinkers on revolutionary struggle, colonialism, and racial difference in human history. The last question is Sleep Snatcher book, I guess? The last book that kept you up way late. I don't think I stayed up way late finishing the 5th season, but I was definitely like obsessed with it. Like I feel like I spent most of a weekend just reading it for like hours and hours, which isn't something I normally do with a book. But the deeper I got into it, like the more that I just like wanted to keep reading and keep reading. So I feel like that's gonna have to be my answer for that. Hope you enjoyed this chatty video. Leave a comment if you feel like it. I know I haven't been very active in my comments lately. To be honest with you all, I just have not had the time, energy, or will to want to engage with, you know, book related stuff. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Peace.